welcome to the Get Fit with Jodelle podcast. I am, as usual, Jodelle. And what's your morning routine? Because part of my morning routine has to include light therapy, especially red light. So I start my day by either sitting in front of my little red light that I have called the Photon. And I either decide I'm going to sit in front of it or I'm going to lay down with my head in front of it, which we'll get into in a little bit why I would do that. And then as a second part of my light therapy, I aim to watch the sunrise every morning and get that early morning red light from the sun to shine into my eyes and set my circadian rhythm for the day. Not only is it soothing, but it sets me up for better sleep at night. Light therapy has been found to greatly enhance health. And I spend my day around balancing my light. And so to help me understand and to help you understand the importance of red light in particular, I'm happy to have back on the podcast for the second time, Brian Richards from SaunaSpace. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Joelle.
Yeah,
glad to be here again.
So if you guys missed our first episode, I'll link it in the show notes below because you're gonna want to dive into that, and then you want to pay attention to this one because we're going to dive in deep as we discuss how improving your light can bring up your immune system, amp up your thyroid, aid in cancer prevention, and even how it can kill cancer cells. And we'll also discuss hair loss. How about that? And the detox factor of including red light every day. We are bombarded with heavy metals, which makes us more susceptible to EMF because those metals, they attract that EMF. We're bombarded by glyphosate or Roundup, which causes toxic buildup and even cancer, and bombarded with stress, which weakens virtually every part of our body. And yet what we will talk about today can and will address all of these areas of your life and has long-term lasting benefits when it comes to living optimally and feeling optimal. So like I've said many times, it's not really about the food, you guys. Let's get our light right. And with that all said, Brian, let's talk about red light. You know, the first time I had you on, we dealt with it, but I want you to touch on, now that we're in the midst of this pandemic too, let's discuss why using red light is so beneficial to our health in so many ways.
Yeah, Jodelle, we're fundamentally more beings of light than we are even beings of food. We eat food every day and it keeps us alive. We need water every day for sure, but it's no coincidence that the sun nourishes all life on Earth. It turns out that we have cellular receptors in our mitochondria that absorb certain wavelengths of light, and in doing so, they activate basically healing systems in the cells, and there's a wide array of effects. You get increased collagen production, you get anti-aging effects, you get regenerative effects in the cells, you have inflammatory mediation effects. And so all that could be described as cellular reoptimization. The red light does this, the near-infrared light does this from the sun. Actually, the near-infrared light, you know, we're such visual creatures. When you look at my product, the Photon, and with the thermal light bulb in it, you see the red light. So you say, oh, well, red light therapy. But in fact, there's a larger emission of near-infrared light, which is we don't see, but it does the same thing. It triggers mitochondrial response. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that 40% of sunlight is near-infrared. And this is the same wavelength that actually penetrates really deeply into the tissue. So you talk about using the Photon on your head. Mm-hmm. Your brain is protected by your skull. It's the thickest bone tissue in your body. And the only wavelengths of the sun that have been shown to penetrate bone tissue effectively are actually near infrared. Mm-hmm. So when we want to do red light therapy to our deep internal tissues, we actually need to be doing near infrared light therapy, which you can get that from LEDs. If you get a 830 nanometer, say, LED, that would be a near infrared light therapy. Or you can go to what we do at SaunaSpace is we use this high Kelvin incandescent bulb that it emits red light and near infrared light, but it's more near infrared centric, which is what the sun is. The sun's like, I don't know, 15% red or something, but it's about 40% near infrared. So the biggest chunk of what nourishes all life on Earth and the biggest chunk of the sunlight that reaches the Earth is the same chunk, this light band that both penetrates really deeply into the body. And when it gets in deep, it has these amazing restorative, rejuvenative, healing effects. and it's every tissue type of the body. That's what's also really interesting, is we're not talking about the skin or just the liver. Every cell type in the body except red blood cells has mitochondria, and therefore can benefit from this light therapy stuff. So it's really relevant overall. It just, it's ancestral humans got that light every day. They got it like you choose in the morning to, that's the gazing into the sunrise and watching the sunset are time-honored traditions. They actually are very helpful for us. There's research out there that shows that if you get red light and near infrared light in the morning before blue light, it like you say, it establishes a ideal circadian rhythm, a sleep cycle for your body. Whereas if you instead reach to your cell phone and look at blue light first in the morning, it actually disrupts that cycle. It has a de-optimizing effect. So ideally we get red near infrared in the morning, we get it all day long. And from the sun, even though you do get blue and ultraviolet, you get red near infrared and you get a lot of it. And so ancestral humans, they understood this. They made bonfires and they had fireplaces, and we have a long relationship with making fire. And it's not just for heat, it's actually it's for light therapy. So it has neuropsychiatric effects, like it releases serotonin and dopamine, red light, near infrared light therapy, by shining that on the nerve cells.
Yeah.
You see in the literature so much amazing, amazing research in using near infrared and red light to heal nerve tissue damage, trauma tissue, and for stroke recovery. It's used for pain reduction. It's used for wound healing. And now we're seeing more and more when we look into it, it actually has corrective effects on these higher order aspects of the body, like correcting hormone signaling and hormone function. And I know you want to talk about the thyroid a little bit, but also insulin.
Yeah.
So, also when we use what we use at SaunaSpace, an incandescent bulb, we also deliver the effects of heat, because we have this penetrating sort of lower energy near infrared that it's not triggering mitochondrial function, but it's going in deep and giving you radiant penetrated heating. It's heating up the cells. And that's really where you get the detox. There's not as much of a detox effect that occurs. There's corrective effects that occur with light therapy, but in terms of removing toxins and toxicants and pathogens and heavy metals and things from our body and from our cells, it's the heat that does that. So we're all about like doing both of those things at the same time here. What we do at SaunaSpace, we want to heat the cells up, and we want to photobiomodulate them, which is light controlling biology. It's a fancy term for light therapy. So we do that all together. And it's interesting. You talked about what we're dealing with, the public health crisis right now. Still ongoing, actually. A lot of people are still getting COVID and dealing with COVID. I myself had COVID this year. It didn't affect me too bad, but I did lose my sense of taste for a little bit, a couple of days, and I definitely couldn't go to work for a couple of days. I was at my home, but I used my sauna and other basic principles, the food is medicine type principles, and got through it without the use of any kind of pharmaceutical approaches, and I wasn't hospitalized or anything. But it's interesting that red light therapy and near infrared light therapy have very interesting effect on the immune system. They do, Joda, they do what's called immune modulation. So they don't activate your immune system and make it hyperactive, and they don't suppress your immune system. They do what's called immune modulation. So they actually improve both sides of it. They improve the responsiveness of the initial sort of attack response of the immune system, but then they also modulate and improve the reformation phase, the stage 2 of the immune system. If you don't have a good reformation phase where you want your immune actors to go back into the barracks and go back to sleep, if they don't, you get what are called like cytokine storms and autoimmune damage, wherein the immune system defenders of the body actually attack ourselves. They attack our own body. And you see that with MS and all these autoimmune diseases. You see it with thyroid, hypothyroidism as well. And also in the infectious disease world. And we see that with COVID, when people develop, an array of symptoms we call COVID-19 as a result of getting infected with the SARS-CoV-2 virus. Sometimes there's a lot of people experiencing what's called a cytokine storm.
Right.
The cytokines are like the little bullets that white blood cells shoot out to kill the pathogen. But the cytokines can actually damage our own cells. They're kind of like these non-specific bullets that are, and so one of the things that is presumably happening is the cytokines damage the nerve cells in the nose, and the nerve trees and the nerve pathways that connect the brain to the nose. And so people are experiencing long-term loss of sense of smell, for example.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just an initial, you cannot have a loss of sense of smell and taste when you have very low zinc as well. But for these so-called long haul COVID symptoms that some people are having, the cytokines have actually damaged our own nerve cells. So what do you do in that case? Well, that's where light therapy is really fascinating, for not just dealing with the short-term symptoms of infectious disease, but also repairing, restoring function, and especially in the nerve tissue. So light therapy, very interesting. It has those regenerative effects where it promotes regeneration in the cell, regardless of the cell type. But in the initial immune response, light therapy, for example, one of the 3 direct effects of near-infrared light hitting the mitochondria is the release of nitric oxide out of the cell. So we get vasodilation that way, we get improved blood flow, but we also can leverage nitric oxide itself. Nitric oxide is the first attack agent. The immune system uses nitric oxide to kill things. And so you are boosting like the first sort of attackers of immune response in just by shining this light on you. It's really crazy. And we can get that light from the sun, but we can get it from LEDs, but we can also get it from high wattage incandescent bulbs, like what we use a thermalite bulb at SaunaSpace. It's basically a bulb that I've tuned the filament to be more near infrared centric. It runs at a little higher Kelvin, so it delivers a lot more of the light therapy wavelengths, the mitochondrial stimulating wavelengths, versus a standard heat lamp.
Mm-hmm.
But even a standard heat lamp, this was understood a long time ago. There's something special about incandescent light, and it's the fact that you get mitochondrial stimulation and heat at the same time. And heat obviously has its own immune boosting effects. We talk about detoxification, and that's probably the most well understood aspect of sauna therapy and of heat therapy, of heating the body up artificially. But certainly heat activates your immune system.
Yeah.
The heat shock proteins are the fundamental basis of that. You heat up the cell for a period of minutes, and you get these like dormant workers. They're called heat shock proteins. They get produced by the nucleus, and they help cell detox. But they also go around, and they repair misfolded proteins and repair protein structure and fix where the proteins are in the cell. And they actually go outside of the cell and fix the proteins as well. So here's a really interesting thing. The heat therapy is not just detoxing, it's promoting cellular reoptimization, improved protein function. And when you talk about disease and death and sort of the cells not working well and the tissue's not working well, protein malfunction is a big part of it. Proteins are really complicated structures. They need to be folded exactly correctly. They need to be produced through gene expression correctly. And so if you have a misreading of the DNA, then that kind of has a domino effect down the line to where when the protein is produced, it's not produced right.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, Dr. Mercola talked about this recently. Most people, it's presumed, have like 20 to 30% of their proteins are malformed in their body. And so we're all just kind of like struggling along with this pretty mediocre functioning. We're very de-optimized. So when you do heat therapy, you don't just detox, you also improve cellular functioning, particularly at the protein level, which are the line workers. They're doing all the work in the body. And so here's an interesting tie-in, as I mentioned before, about improving hormone functioning. The insulin receptors on the outside of the cell is like this protein tail. Mm-hmm. And the insulin is supposed to come in and lock into it with lock and key in this very complicated fit. And so when that doesn't work so well, you get insulin resistance, where the signaling is not good. You get reduced insulin signaling, increased insulin resistance. So your pancreas, it makes more insulin, and you get you get insulin resistance issues, which over time lead to like diabetes types effects. And insulin resistance has a wide array of bad effects on the body over time. And so really interesting that you can take heat therapy and heat shock the cell. It produces heat shock proteins. They go out of the cell and they repair the insulin receptor protein, which then improves insulin signaling. So here you have a cellular effect of just heating the cell up, something very simple, very safe, and you're inducing a systemic effect, a systemic improvement, where you're improving the ability of that cell to receive an insulin signal, and extrapolate that across all of the cells. You get reduced insulin resistance over time, and that has huge implications for our health. You want to definitely improve that. Most people are insulin resistant to some degree anyway, and diabetes and insulin resistance, they're inextricably tied, but also so many diseases are linked to insulin resistance, and it's absolutely a disease of civilization. It's not something you, in my honest opinion, you don't need drugs for. I'm not a healthcare provider, of course, but I think it's just a food is medicine type solution. But at the same time, it's like, well, once your insulin receptors are malformed and your insulin resistance is high, how do you repair that? You don't, it's not easy to do so unless you have an understanding of things like light therapy. Light therapy is a built-in way where the environment around us can heal us. And so it's very safe and it's very effective. And so we're seeing great benefit of using light therapy for that sort of instance of sort of hormone malfunctioning, but also with the thyroid stuff too. So very interesting how it's very safe, low risk therapy you could do at home, has such a wide array of effects. You mentioned also using it for improving the sleep. It absolutely, you get sleep, you have sleep improvement effects with light therapy, also with sauna, with heating up the body, causing a severe temperature change in the body. You can improve your sleep. And so much more. And so then I also, like I started in the beginning, a tie in with immune response. It's like, well, what doesn't it do? It seems to do so many things. It's really beyond the scope of this talk right now to talk about everything, but it absolutely has relevance in helping you keep healthy and keep your immune system from getting compromised. And then if you do get sick or something happens, people are also using light therapy and sauna to deal with the symptoms related to infectious disease. Like that's what the body does. When you get a fever,
right,
your body heats itself up and knows what to do. It knows that by heating itself up artificially, it can, and then inducing a fever state, it can activate the heat shock protein response. So we're just being, we're informed by that knowledge, and we're doing that ourselves, every day in the sauna, or several times a week. And then with the photon as well, in a targeted fashion, in a localized fashion.
I could really just end the podcast right there, because everything you said, it was like what you mentioned was what doesn't it do? Because it's so true. Like, without just talking about a product, red light in general, there's just so many. If you go on PubMed and search, you're going to get hundreds and hundreds of things that light therapy does. And one of the studies I think you might have been referring to when you were talking about COVID, I had read a quote in your newsletter where you shared this study about boosting the immune system. It says, we suggest that the use of adjunct photobiomodulation in the early stages of severe ARDS or pneumonia seen in COVID-19 patients can enhance healing and reduce the need for prolonged ventilator support and ICU stay. So if somebody could start using red light right at the very crux of when they start feeling those symptoms come on, who knows what they could be preventing, how bad it could be for them, right? So just sitting in front of something as simple as a red light could be the difference between ending up in the hospital or not. So I just really like that point. And you mentioned how you're just taking something that's so basic and so ancestral of being in sunlight and transferring it to something that's a product that we can all have in our environments, in our homes, in our offices, that we can simply use alongside our day just to enhance our health. And I love that it goes back to that ancestral rhythm of the sun, because I believe it was Dr. Darius Dinshaw. You might be familiar with him. He's this doctor.
Dr. Dinshaw, yeah. He's one of the first light therapy docs,
right,
early
yeah,
20th century.
Over like 100 years ago. So he developed this successful therapy of light. He would treat diseases with the combination of light and had all these great successes. And what it was like how colors relate to human physiology. I think he believed that every element exists in the 7 prismatic colors. So for example, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, carbon, and other elements that make up 97% of the body are associated with blue, red, green, and yellow, respectively. And in a healthy person, these colors are balanced, but when we become imbalanced, that's when dis-ease takes over. So he called it Spectrochrome Therapy. You probably already knew that, but maybe the listeners aren't familiar with him. So check that out, because that's pretty cool. It's a method of healing that used to attune color waves to the body. So when you hear that, it's hard to argue that maybe, again, it's not about the food. As I've said many times, it's actually more about what kind of light you're in. So what you've done is just make it accessible so that we can be in that light. And I really appreciate that. So what about, let's talk about cancer real briefly before we jump into the thyroid. I'm glad you teased them with the thyroid, because I definitely want to go more there, and some other things like hair loss as well, because I'm hearing a lot about that in my private practice of meeting with clients. But I had read that this author, Thomas Cowan, who's a leading cardiologist, recommends SaunaSpace, your product, in his new book, Cancer and the New Biology of Water, as a part of cancer therapy, because studies have found that when near infrared is applied, cancer cells swell and then they burst and they cause cancer cells to die. Is that correct?
Yeah, and you definitely would want to defer to Dr. Cowan in that. I'm certainly no expert in this topic, and certainly I can't make any medical claims to any treatment of anything in that regard. But there's definitely interesting cellular mechanisms going on, and I think people conclude on their own, what the effect may that have on disease. It's kind of, there's a lot of different theories of cancer out there, but one of them is the beer theory of cancer. Wherein basically so cancer is an out of control growth, and the argument is all the time we have cancerous cells in our bodies constantly through various autocorrection systems resolving those. It's controlling growth of cancerous cells through apoptosis, or even within the cell. It's like there's all these corrective mechanisms that are controlling it, because you want to promote growth. The cells are always dividing, you're constantly replenishing and growing, but if you have too much, you get something that's out of control. So the beer theory of cancer kind of goes like this. There's the mitochondria in the cancerous cells are stuck in fermentation. So they can't engage in oxygen-based cellular respiration. They're basically producing the energy via the very wasteful, sort of inefficient, but sort of the backup way. And that's called fermentation. When you produce, when the mitochondria produce energy without oxygen, it leads to a lot of toxic byproduct, lactic acid and other stuff. And so the theory is that those cancerous cells are stuck. The mitochondria in those cancer cells are stuck in fermentation. And so, so what's interesting about light therapy is we're not just activating the mitochondria to repair the cell and correct gene expression and the DNA structure. We're actually improving mitochondrial functioning in and of itself. So we're getting the mitochondria to work better. And so the cell can produce more mitochondria and either get rid of the malfunctioning broken mitochondria or decide to get rid of the entire cell itself. But you also get what's called increased mitochondrial density. So when you have more mitochondria, if you have this healer in the cell that is the mitochondria and it does all these cool things, if you shine light on it, what if you had 2 of them? Well, what if you had 4 of them? So it's actually associated with sauna, but also with more of a meat-based diet. but also with near-infrared light therapy too, you can increase the number of mitochondria per cell, basically mitochondrial density. So more mitochondria, the better. And we see that mitochondria seem to be coming up again and again as like one of the primary actors in cellular optimization, cell functioning, and longevity too. And so we want to boost the functioning of the mitochondria in the cell, improve how they work, and increase the number of them in the cells. And then of course, continually activate them through this hormetic stress therapy of going in, shining the right wavelength of light, and then letting these really smart, intelligent systems correct things slowly and carefully and subtly. And so it's not like when you take a pharmaceutical drug, you're either engaging in symptom removal or you have a very specific outcome you're aiming for. With mitochondrial activation, you're just saying, okay, I want you to just start doing stuff, just start fixing everything, please. Cellular communication with the nucleus, how you produce energy, and then one of the reasons that also that red light therapy and near-infrared light therapy, I think, is really effective for infectious disease symptoms is because it has an anti-inflammatory response it induces. That's the reason why people who do near-infrared light therapy usually feel immediate reduction in pain, and it's used widely for pain relief. And that's just immediately a reduction in inflammation. The near-infrared light therapy causes inflammatory mediator production. So you immediately get reduced cell and tissue inflammation, which is important for pain and stuff, but also for that resolving the immune response at the end, but also for the oxygen desaturation that occurs. That was the study I think that we quoted in the newsletter. It was just a case write-up where a gentleman was treated with near-infrared light 20 minutes a day for 4 days, and he was in the hospital with severe pneumonia. He was about to be put on a ventilator. His tissue oxygen saturation was extremely low, so very dangerous level. And 4 treatments with near-infrared light, 20 minutes per session, allowed him to walk out of the hospital without going on the ventilator, without being intubated, and obviously like dramatically improved, right? And so inflammation reduction is a huge aspect of dealing with cellular problems, and when your cells don't work right, you get tissular problems, and you get organ level problems, and you get disease.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure many people who are what I call, and what Dr. Jack Kruse calls, mitochondriacs, it's like, the importance of keeping up the mitochondria, because really all of the diseases we're looking at is mitochondrial disease, of just having poor functioning mitochondria or non-existent, not having enough. Like you mentioned, we can improve them, we can make more of them. So I love that, again, here's a simple product that you can make a part of your daily routine that can enhance your mitochondria just as well as it's enhancing virtually every system of your body. You mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that it penetrates deep into the body. How deep does your light, the specific bulb that you have, go into the body? What would you say?
Well, it's the tissue penetration is related to the wavelength. So if we look at a chart, 600 to 1,000 nanometer wavelengths, that's visible red light that we can see, and the upper end of the near-infrared light band, 600 to 1,000 nanometers. All of those wavelengths, when they strike the mitochondrial protein, the light receptor protein, they induce that light therapy response. The question is, do all of those wavelengths from 600 to 1,000 have equal tissue penetration? And the answer is no. Red light goes in the most shallow, and it's absorbed a lot by not so much water, but melanin and hemoglobin, the 2 major chromophores in your body besides water. So you don't get deep penetration of red light. That's why if you want to do photobiomodulation of the thyroid, of the brain, of inside the bones, all the white blood cells and so many things are produced in the bones, right? In the bone tissue, the red blood cells and stuff. So, and there's mitochondria in there too, but to photobiomodulate in there, red light therapy will never, red light wavelengths will not penetrate very, very much below the skin. So they all have the same effect. But if we want to have the mitochondrial response effects into any sort of deep tissue at all, we want to be more focused on 830 nanometers or so. It's right in the middle between red and the heating near infrared. It's like 830 nanometers. So it's kind of in the middle of that band of mitochondrial stimulation, 600 to 1,000 nanometers. But it's absolutely a matter of wavelength. The near infrared is the only wavelength that's been shown to penetrate bone tissue. So if we talk about whether it's from the sun or from an LED or from, the photon here, the thermal light bulb, it's those near infrared wavelengths that penetrate the most deeply. They've been shown to penetrate 4 or 5 or even more inches into the body. Average penetration is probably 3 or 4 inches per photon. It's kind of back of the hand. But if you think about 3 or 4 inches and you think about your gut,
right,
or your brain, and obviously it's not penetrating really thick bone tissue as effectively, but it's the only wavelength that does. So if you want to nourish the nerve cells in your brain, you're not doing so much with red light. It's really near infrared light that's doing the job. And so that's why it's intriguing that the sun is really primarily focused on near infrared in terms of the overall emission. The largest plurality is near infrared, not red. And so that's why we tuned our bulb to kind of focus on near infrared, because it does the same thing as red light, but it does it way deeper. And
that is fantastic.
And what's really interesting about that is, and it has a relationship, something that Dr. Tom Cowan talks about and others talk about too, is this concept of the fourth state of water, of structured water, of this idea that water has not just 3 states, not just liquid, gas, solid. It has a 4th state called the gel state, or the smart water state, or the structured water state. And when you have that, you basically make the water more bioavailable. Instead of there being a random arrangement of positive, negative charges in the water, it arranges kind of in this thoughtful, structured pattern of electrons and protons and the charges. And that makes it more bioavailable, and that makes it more effective. And so, our bodies are 70% water by weight, but we're 99% water volumetrically. So water is such a huge actor in our body, and it's not just a medium through which things occur. It has its own role. It carries information. It creates nutrients. It connects different cells to each other, like the newest system of the body that's been discovered or classified by conventional sort of modern, conventional science is what's it called, Joe Dale? It's the fascial system. It's like it's considered to be its own organ, its own system. So it's the tissue between the tissues. It's the tissue that kind of interconnects everything. And water is not just the medium of all that, but it's the essential communicator of information between this group of cells over here and this group of cells over here. Use water, and it's structured water that does that. Liquid water is used for detoxification in the body. And so you have a role of liquid water in the body, but most of the water in the body, it turns out that the more and more we study it, appears to be structured. And there's this whole science behind this. We probably don't have time to get into that, but 100% of the water, almost 100% of the water in the mitochondria is structured. And when you structure water in the cell, it makes it turn into this gel state. So it's kind of between liquid and solid, and that allows for more energy efficient functioning of cellular systems of all types in the cell. Like, it's not a pool of water in the cell, it's this gel, and all the metabolites in the cell can move around more efficiently. And so why is that interesting? Well, it's because you have that same need for the water to be in the correct quantum state,
right,
in the brain. But you can't photobiomodulate those, or you can't structure the water inside of your skull with red light. You need near infrared. So again, back to near infrared, back to the deepest penetrating tissue. And so it turns out that red light therapy, but also near infrared light therapy, and this whole ancestral relationship with the sun has a whole nother role. It has a water optimizing effect in our body. And so it's structured water. You can read about it. You can take like structured water. You can structure water through swirling it like in a vortex, and you can spray it out on the field, in the crop fields, and it will reactivate the microbiome of a fallow field. And in 1 or 2 years, all of the Roundup in the field is broken down into
love that.
constituent elements. So it has like this really amazing, like rejuvenating effect on all life. And so it just, another thing that's going on in our body, all wavelengths of the sun do that. But with the near infrared, again, being the deepest tissue penetrator, it's the number one most important one, I'd say, to structure the water in the body and to make it just optimized like everything else. So it's another thing that light therapy is doing. And the more we research that, the more we see very interesting stuff going on there. And, you know, Dr. Cowan talks about that. Dr. Gerald Pollack discovered all of that.
Right.
But it's really fascinating how it's being used for these very mundane solutions, like making toxic fallow land, restoring the environment, the quality of it so that it can sustain life again, but also in our bodies, structuring the water in your brain makes you happy. And Dr. Pollack talks about that. And so again, watching the sunrise or using, you know, the photon or the SaunaSpace sauna on your face and on your head as a lot of benefit, more than just making you healthier. It has a lot of neuropsychiatric effects that are good
for sure
in general. And nowadays people, you know, that was one of the things with the pandemic and sort of the lockdown approach that the West, you know, not everybody did it, but in the United States, most of the states had a lockdown period, is it caused people to be more indoors and away from the light and the sun, and definitely to our detriment.
Yeah, they may not have put on the COVID-19, so to speak, weight gain from just eating. It could have been because they were indoors, and our bodies thrive on light. Our bodies, we are solar powered. We need light. We need the right kind of light. Going back to what you were talking about with insulin, you know, there's studies that show that blue light after dark actually stimulates insulin. It can cause people to have sugar cravings. So maybe that's why you're doing late night eating. So maybe
late night snacking.
Instead of turning on the Netflix, maybe they should turn on the photon and sit in front of that. And I guarantee them that they will get way sleepier, way faster than watching something on the tube for sure. So,
yeah,
I
mean, I'm glad you brought that up. We should talk about that for a second. We're talking about light, but what about blue light?
Right.
Blue light has a biological role. You need blue light during the day to induce melatonin production in the pineal gland, and then you need that released at the end of the day. That's the melatonin cycle, and that's a part of our circadian rhythm and our sleep. But what happens when we go indoors is we cut off our stimulus of near infrared red light that we normally get all day long, and then we amplify the amount of blue only light we get. And it's a very particular type of blue light. It's a flickering, pulsing, high wattage blue light. Usually from LEDs or fluorescent lights. That's what most people have. And like you said, it's interesting after dark, but also I've read another study that sort of supports the notion that if you eat under blue light, you eat more. You end up becoming fatter. As a habit of eating under blue light all day long. And we have blue light everywhere, not just from overhead lighting, but also our screens. And blue light it causes free radical formation. That's why we wear blue blockers. It has, you know, a direct oxidative stress damage. Yeah, there you go. Me too. But also it indirectly over time causes damage to our nucleus and our DNA and all these other things. And it's something that is it's basically an environmental stress. And our bodies interpret it as like a tiger attacking us, you know, but there's a cognitive dissonance almost there, because where's the tiger? Where's the actual threat? Well, it's this light. And we have all these light receptors in our body. We have blue light receptors everywhere, actually, in our gut. You know, not just, it's in our skin, you know, it's not just in our eyes. And so we interpret this basically as stress. And just like EMF stress, if it's an unending stress without interruption, it's not hormetic stress where we can recover from it. It's something that just is attacking us all the time and slowly breaking us down. And as a part of our Western lifestyle, we have so much blue light and no more red near infrared light. It's really quite damaging to us slowly but surely. So it's something that people should be aware of. The junk light indoors is very synthetic, and we're not biologically programmed to really deal with it, just like EMF stress. So, you know, it's not a cure-all or a perfect thing, but using, you know, some source of red light and near infrared light is helpful for balancing out those crazy blue light levels you have indoors. And, just imagine it like an electric fireplace, that it feels good because it is good. And it's not just the light you see, it's the near infrared wavelengths you don't see. That the more we can have that type of incandescent light indoors to combat and basically make more naturalistic the light indoors. We make it a little less synthetic, a little more tolerable, and everything matters. That's why in that, natural medicine and natural health is a matter of discipline. We want to stack these therapies up. There's not like a pill, a cure-all, but if we take this knowledge of food and of light and other things and combine them together, I'm very confident we can not just overcome most of these diseases of civilization, most of these problems we have nowadays, but do so in a very affordable fashion.
Yeah, absolutely.
And have our control over it. People want control over their lives, and feel like a lot of us have lost control in the last couple of years, and there's been a big shift back towards more conventional solutions for things. Yeah. And yet what we're doing is so effective, but you just like eating, you have to eat correctly every day.
But yeah, and there's so much confusion out there. So I love that, just getting your light right and just eating foods that naturally come from the earth, just avoid processed foods. I call it earth-based, whether it's plant-based or meat-based, just eat from the earth. Don't eat from the, Chick-fil-A or something. But then also get your light right. And it can be that simple to, like you said, really dial everything in. It doesn't have to be complicated. There's so many varieties of eating. Just find the one that suits you, that's earth-based, and then get your light right. So I want to jump into hair loss, because it plays into thyroid, which is where we're going. And I can't tell you how many women in particular are coming to me going, my hair's falling out. Well, that's a classic thyroid symptom. Same with men too. It's just that men are undiagnosed with thyroid issues because they typically won't go to the doctor thinking something's wrong with them. They just, go along with it. But the benefits of hair loss are vast with red light therapy, which is another issue that I want to dive into, because they have these hats now on the market that are like built-in LED red light hats that people are putting on to stimulate hair growth. I get it, cool. But I just chose to lay down in front of my photon, like you have right there. I set it on my bed, I lay down on it, and I let it shine on the top of my head. And that stimulates my hair follicles. It stimulates my brain, like you were saying with mitochondria. It stimulates that skull bone generation. So like, it's way bigger than just what I feel like the hat could do, but I wanted your opinion. So let's talk about the difference in hair growth and follicle stimulation with something like red incandescent light of the photon versus artificial red LED light. What would you say?
Well, it's a matter of wavelength and wattage. When you talk about low-level light therapy, photobiomodulation, you need the right wavelength. So that's that 600 to 1,000 nanometer range, whether it's red light or near infrared light. And then you need a sort of a biologically impactful wattage. You need the right water hose, and then you need the right amount of water to come out. So you need that dose to be right. Yeah. You can achieve that with multiple forms of light therapy. The difference again comes back to tissue penetration, I think. So with hair loss, you're talking about tissues that are more superficial, more sort of like the hair follicles go about a centimeter down or whatever. Okay. And so red light can be effective, but again, why are you losing the hair in the first place? Is it just the damage to your follicle? Is it not functioning right? Well, not really, because the body gets rid of hair minerals by the hair. And so when you have hair loss, often it's not necessarily due to senescence, but rather the body is like mineral deprived and nutrient deprived, and it's like trying to conserve what it has. And I think some of that's going on with with what you referred to when people have thyroid related hair loss. And of course, I'm not a healthcare provider. I'm just reading the research.
You sure know enough that you could be. That's what I think.
Well, yeah, it's important to make that caveat with the way things are nowadays. But
Sure, yeah.
but yeah, all of us, and that was sort of, I had adrenal fatigue symptoms myself, and that's how I got into this electric incandescent light bath, this crazy thing that we do now at SaunaSpace. But for me, it's what are the root causes? What's going on deep? If you have problems at the skin level, if your skin looks funny or you have hair issues, that's a sign of deep of disease, of deeper disease deep inside. And so back to your question about like what technology is better, I don't think there's a technology that's better per se. It's a matter of how are we addressing the root causes? If we use near infrared light, we can go in deep and address deeper organ functioning, which is the root of the thyroid. You know, the thyroid itself is regulated by, I forget, sodium, potassium, or it's regulated by minerals, right?
Yeah, by iodine and zinc and magnesium. Yeah.
But there's an interconnection. You know, there's an interdependent interdependent relationship between all these different organs of the body. So if you want to address the hair that's coming out of your head, for me, I would absolutely approach it from a systemic perspective. Sure. We want to deal with the whole body. Definitely red light therapy, near infrared light therapy have been shown to reduce alopecia. So you're improving the functioning of the hair follicle and the root structure, and improving that tissue and the ability of your hair follicles and your skin to grow hair. But the mineral content in the hair and the quality of the hair is definitely more than just skin deep. So I'm a big believer in doing full body light therapy, full body PBM, and full body heat therapy to cleanse the body of pathogens and of toxins, and then have the cellular rejuvenation effects that occur with both of these things, and the interplay between light therapy and heat therapy, and restructuring the water in your body, and all these different ancillary effects that come from heating up the body again and again and again.
Yeah.
You know, and doing light therapy every day on the body. Go ahead.
No, that's awesome, because I think I loved what you said. Like, you really do have to go to the root of the problem. So is it the fact that you're stimulating the hair follicle, but you could also be stimulating your thyroid to function better, and that's why the alopecia and the hair thinning is calming down, because you're actually going to the root of that thyroid, which red light does. So, you know, let's briefly jump into exactly how it stimulates the thyroid, and then I wanted to talk about your products, and we'll wrap up with that and just really focus on what you offer, because you make it so accessible for people no matter where they're living at, even in a camper like me. So
that's right. You're using your photon in the camper.
That's so cool. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, we also got into the van life thing with the pandemic. We've been slowly but surely fixing up the van and taking it out a lot. And it's funny you say that, because you can take the photon actually in a car with you. It uses 2.1 amps. It's hungry. It's a hungry guy. But if you have one of those really cool camping portable batteries,
sure.
Like I forget what they're called, but yeah, you can bring your photon with you and certainly have that on the road. And there's a lot of people too. When I travel, I can't bring the sauna with me. I bring the photon. It goes on the airplane. You can take on the airplane, no problem, plug it in anywhere. And even that is for me, it really sustains me in travel that I do, because travel's stressful, and nowadays travel's even more stressful and maybe even more risky from a infectious disease perspective. So whatever you can do. I have a couple, as far as thyroid goes, I did look up a couple articles in the PubMed. I think they're really relevant. Basically, near infrared light therapy, they're using light therapy for improving thyroid functioning overall. And there's quite a number of studies actually that show improvement of thyroid function in terms of increased production of T4, but also there's these things called TPOABs. They're thyroid antibodies.
That's right.
And they can cause damage, like the cytokines. You know, they can cause damage to our own tissues, unfortunately, when our systems kind of get screwed up.
Yep.
And what you see in these studies is you use near-infrared light on the thyroid to decrease these peroxidase antibodies, these TPO-ABs, and improve production of T4, but also there's what's called improving the vascularization of the thyroid. So the vascular system would be the blood vessels, right? The things that supply the blood to the thyroid. Blood brings in all the nutrients, it takes away all the toxins. You need blood flow, right? And blood carries the oxygen for everything. So very important. So red light therapy improves, it vasodilates, it improves blood flow, it increases tissue oxygenation and the oxygen carrying capacity, basically, of the vascular system. But what's really interesting too is, and this is not as well referenced in the studies, but it's an absolute, not in terms of thyroid, but it's an absolute fact in terms of heat therapy, is that when you heat shock the tissue, like any tissue that we have, when you heat it up in a sustained fashion, you cause vascular shear stress, and you kind of force the blood vessels to get thicker and grow new pathways to reinvigorate tissue. That's why it's quite amazing for scar tissue, actually, is you are forcing the tissue through heat therapy to revascularize itself and create new blood vessels in new areas where it didn't have them before, to better supply tissue with blood through the creation of new blood vessels. But also the blood vessels that are already there, we're making them wider, we're making them thicker, stronger, through heat therapy, but also through light therapy via pretty much a different cellular system, the mitochondrial system, and the results thereof. You get also improvements in tissue vascularization. And so they're seeing that just using red light therapy, and in these studies they're using LEDs, so there's no heat therapy component at all. You're seeing improved blood supply and blood flow to the thyroid, and that results in increased vascularization, results in the body just being able to use the thyroid, and the thyroid be able to perform better and function better. So I thought those were really fascinating.
Yeah, for sure.
There's also this there's this therapy, I forget what it's called. It's called Lt4 therapy. I think it's called a levothyroxine.
Yeah, levothyroxine.
I think it's like a lithium-based drug, basically.
Yeah,
you familiar with that?
synthetic T4. Like a synthroid is a levothyroxine. Yeah, it's like giving synthetic thyroid hormone.
So there's a couple interesting studies on humans where they basically using near-infrared light therapy, they reduced significantly their need for the Lt4 drug.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So they're not needing that because they're getting the thyroid to make its own, right, in a better fashion.
Yeah.
Which is a very interesting thing, and that's kind of controversial. And I'm no healthcare provider; it's just my curious opinion in the matter. But it's when you give the body an exogenous hormone, it tends to think, well, I am well supplied by this hormone, I don't need to make my own. And you see that with like people who take synthetic testosterone over long periods of time. And so here's another case where, instead of doing hormone replacement therapy, what if we could get the body to just make the hormone correctly, like it's supposed to?
Novel idea.
Novel idea, right? Right. And so here we see a lot of relevance, and there's also a really awesome lady named Carrie. She runs a really awesome podcast called Deliciously Organic. And I know that she describes using sauna and actually some of our products too in dealing with her Hashimoto's and reversing it. And there's some thyroid issues related to that. So we definitely have reports from our customers, is what I'm saying, on using the photon and using the sauna for their thyroid issues, and having really, really great stories of apparently great improvement, big impact on their health.
Yeah. And the few studies that I looked up, what I loved about them is they were long-term studies. And one of them was like 6 years later after near infrared light photobiomodulation demonstrated lasting benefits. So, I mean, this
Really
is something
amazing.
that you do it daily, but yet it's not just serving you that day, it's serving you long-term, and making it a habit, making it part of your routine would be something that will just continue to help you positively age instead of just age. So going into your products now, as we wrap up, let's talk about what you love, what you're working on, what you think people should check out. Obviously, I'm partial to the Photon because that's the one I have, and it works. I can make a little tiny sauna in my little teeny tiny camper shower.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that's the photon right here. So it's this is the best thing to start out with if you're skeptical of the whole concept and you're like, what is this? What are they talking about? How can the light do so many things? It's a really cool way to start out with it. And some people actually use it to build up their ability to actually sit in the sauna. If for folks who are dealing with autoimmune and other chronic ailments that make them limit them in some way, or make them extremely sensitive to heat, or just they're if you tend to be weak and debilitated, you can start out with just one light. But it's not just one light, it's the special made bulb that I designed that's more near infrared centric, so we get 2 to 4 times the light therapy out of it per bulb. And so first we start with a light bulb custom designed for human therapeutic use. And then we install it in a custom made fixture. What you have is the photon, the one light fixture. The sauna heater is called the tungsten. It's 4 of these 250 watt thermal light bulbs, but it's encased in a fixture that's designed to be really safe for human use. There's this protective mesh guard that has a child lock on it, and you can pop it off and take it out, but that keeps you from touching the glass anywhere. And if the glass breaks, it stays in the guard. It's very safe. But that's also grounded to prevent the electric field stress from coming out and affecting you, because we are beings of light. This is all really called electromagnetism, the light from the sun and the electricity from the wall. There are different forms of EMF. Not all EMF is the same. This man-made EMF is problematic. So what we've done is we've designed a fixture that is shielded and grounded. Everything is shielded and grounded. The power cord, all the internal wiring is all shielded, and the Faraday guard itself is protecting you from the electric field, but it allows the filament to heat up, inside there to a high Kelvin, which produces the light. So we get a benefit of the light and the heat without this toxic sidecar that is this EMF that's all around us. So it's very important to use the light bulb in a fixture that's safe and designed for human use. It's also really solidly built. It tilts up. It's got some cool design features, and it's really built to last.
It's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, the wood on it is just phenomenal. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's all handmade here in our shop. Actually, you can see behind me.
I know. I still am due to tour that place because you're not too far from me. So
yeah, well, we would love to have you. We'd love to have you here. Yeah, it's all handmade here in Missouri, and so we've really just taken a lot of pains to design it to be safe, but also trying to wed form and function, trying to make it look nice to not just be this therapy that you use. So because it's basically a lamp that you have at your house, so you want it to look good. And so I use it here at the office. You can see I keep swinging in and out of view. It's on my photon desk arm, which is an accessory we offer. Just to have the light at the office. I'm using it here to beat screen fatigue. So it counteracts the blue light stress from the screens. We talked about blue light stress a little bit. It also actually cancels out the measurable flickering light that comes from all this overhead lighting. That's also a stressful thing on the body. So basically using it to beat, to beat screen fatigue. We call that beating screen fatigue. But also when I go home, I have another photon or two at the house. And when I go home after dark, that's the only light I use, because I don't want blue light and I don't want flickering light after dark, especially. I don't want to disrupt my circadian rhythm, but I also don't want to sit in darkness. So I'm using the photon for optimal nocturnal lighting at home. And then additionally, its primary use would be for localized relief. So you got a problem spot, put it on that. You can use it behind the head before bed to activate lymphatic drainage and prepare the parasympathetic state of the nervous system for sleep. But you can also use it, people use it on their, their foot, if they have a foot problem, or you've got some pain points, to just put it and focus it on that throughout the day. It's very safe to use. It's like you said, you mentioned Dr. Dinshaw, also Dr. Kellogg, who's the inventor of the electric incandescent light bath, also heavily studied this, heavily tested it across 50,000 patients in the first decade of the 20th century, and wrote a book on it called Light Therapeutics in 1910. So light therapy, as you said, has like 120 years of safe use. And actually the incandescent light sauna has that long of safe use as well. So it's very safe what we're doing here, very gentle, and yet so effective in this full spectrum way. So it starts out with the photon, but really that's ultimately kind of an adjunct therapy. Ideally, you have the full sauna. And so we make a really cool sauna in two different versions. They're the same size and footprint. They kind of look the same. And one is our Illuminati sauna. It's our basic sauna that has the 4-light heater and a whole portable enclosure that's handmade. It's really cool. It's all organic. And it has a grounding mat built in. It's bamboo. So that looks cool, and it really smells good in there. But it also grounds you, has that earthing grounding effect. And then if you want, you can get either up front, or you can purchase the EMF shield later and add it to the Illuminati and upgrade your sauna to what's called the Faraday. And that's where you have an EMF blocking liner system all the way around, and not just in the grounding mat and the floor. And that blocks the cell phone signal and the Bluetooth and all this electrosmog stuff from getting inside the sauna. And so we have a more effective therapy because you don't have the voltage stress, and your voltage gated calcium ion channels are not firing all day long. And we offer that too for people who care about it. We offer a very unique sauna experience where you get to sit inside of a grounded Faraday cage during your light therapy, during your sauna. It's very much a return to nature. We have EMF everywhere now, man-made EMFs pretty much everywhere. And so what we're trying to do with this is we're trying to do what's kind of like a biohack. We're trying to trick the body into thinking it's in this perfect ancestral environment, this ideal space in which it can just open up and start repairing and restoring and healing and reoptimizing. And so we try to eliminate all the synthetic elements from the synthetic modern environment and reintroduce as much as possibly ancestral elements. So there's no glass doors on a SaunaSpace sauna. It protects you from any artificial light. And we don't really want so much sound, and we don't want artificial man-made EMF either. And yet we do want near infrared light, a lot of it. And we want it all over our body because we want it everywhere, and we want to sweat. The detox comes from sweating, which comes from heating the body up by a few degrees and enough so that it sweats. And really, detoxification can kind of be measured with that water loss. Like you can measure yourself on a scale before you do your sauna and after you do a sauna. That's your water loss you've had. And then if you want to spend the money and do biomarker testing, you'll see your detox results. If you do a detox panel with like Great Plains or some other labs that do some great toxin testing, you'll see the results are quite amazing. So I ultimately recommend the whole sauna. That's the best thing. That's the most systemic. It's the most full body. But the photon's also amazing to start out with. And what's cool about SaunaSpace too is we use radiant near infrared light to heat the body. So the air temperature inside is not 200 degrees. It's not super hot and intolerable, and yet you'll sweat fast. So you'll sweat faster using near infrared light as your heating source because of the thermodynamic nature of it. It just penetrates in really deeply. So a SaunaSpace sauna session is really quick. It's only 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes. And you really only need to do that 3 times a week. You can do more time. You can do more sessions per day, but as a time commitment, there's like no more impactful way to spend 20 minutes. You just sit there, you do nothing, and you're stacking all these therapies on top of each other: the water structuring, the detox, the light therapy, and the cellular rejuvenation, the anti-aging effects, and also the sensory deprivation that comes, especially in the Faraday, with getting a rest from the EMF, maximizing your healing therapy. And then also I would argue the mindfulness of, we don't ever take time to ourselves.
Mhm.
And yet ancestral humans did that. They had almost every human culture has like some kind of meditative tradition.
Mhm.
And we know the benefits of mindfulness and of presence. And so that's just another thing that you can do in the sauna in that simple 20 minutes that you do. And what I would say beyond all of that is, if I haven't convinced you yet, is that the actual feeling of it's awesome. You know, the feeling is good. It's not just like this thing you're forcing yourself to do to feel better or for health. It actually feels amazing. People report, unlike regular saunas where they're like, I want to get out, I've had enough, this is a little bit intense.
Yeah.
You really want to stay inside a SaunaSpace, and really all these things come together. Probably the light therapy is the most visceral thing that makes you feel happy, but I think when you detox your brain, you get rid of aluminum, mercury in your brain and toxins that are in your brain, that also makes you happy.
It does. Yeah.
And the EMF break also makes you happy. So we've basically obsessed over this over many years to develop the most stacked sauna on earth. That's also just cool design and easy to manage. It's lightweight. You can store it in the closet in the summer. So it's a manageable product. It just plugs into the outlet. You don't need special wiring. And definitely from an impact perspective, it's the most impactful way, I think, that you can spend 20 minutes on your body, and a couple times a week, a few times a week. You know, it's amazing. There's so many studies we didn't have much time to talk about, but in the sauna, if you look on the PubMed, you can look for LLLT and red light therapy and near infrared light therapy. You'll see thousands of studies, as you mentioned. If you look up sauna therapy, you will see also thousands of studies and hundreds of long-term human studies on reducing pretty much the incidence of almost every disease you can think of. And then there's the long-term longevity study from 2015 that basically showed the more you do sauna, the longer you live from a cardiovascular health perspective. And it's like, how can one thing do all those things? Well, one thing can do all those things, but how do we use it? So we're all about making that as accessible and as fun and effective as possible, because nobody has any time for anything anymore.
Yeah, I think we have a new pandemic that's called no one is relaxing anymore. They're not calming down. They're not calming their nervous system. They're always amped up by social media or just the life stressors and stuff like this. So spending, like you said, 20 minutes in a sauna really helps you slow down. It really helps you calm down. And it's so soothing that you're forced to just like really dial in. Okay, I can rest for a little bit. It's okay. I'm doing something good for my body, So you have a discount code to share, which we'll put that in the show notes. So I'm really thankful that you're going to share that with my listeners. I know we all appreciate that. I'm saving up for my own tungsten sauna, so I will get that eventually. But tell them where they can find you. I know you have a podcast on Instagram, so let's just let them know, and then we'll let you go for the day.
Yeah, everything's on SaunaSpace. My blog, my personal blog, where I kind of get a little more risque and dabble in things and just review the science and such. That's blog.sauna.space.
Okay.
And definitely on we're most active on Instagram, and our handle is SaunaSpace. Mm-hmm. And you can actually go on our Instagram and go to our Instagram TV and see our recordings of the Instagram live that I do twice a week. So it's its own podcast. It's only on Instagram right now, but we have a lot of great content on there, some great interviews, a lot of focus on the science and stuff, but we do a lot of testing too, show you how EMFs work and how flickering light works and blue light. And I've got a lot of fancy equipment to show a lot of cool things. So there's a lot of great content on there. And you can also just join us twice a week, 11 a.m. Central on Tuesday and Thursday. And that's our Instagram live. And then it goes on to Instagram TV.
Very cool. Well, Brian, thank you so much for today. You have been a wealth of information. So I know people are going to want to listen to this over and over to get some of those nuggets that they may have missed. So thank you once again, and we'll have you back. We've got more to talk about.
Cool. Thank you for having me again, Jodelle. Really appreciate it.
Promo code alert. What is one of the easiest tips to improve your sleep and lower your stress? Blue light blocking, of course. So Alan, nope, not your neighbor or your friend Alan, but actually artificial light at night, ALAN, Alan is something that after dark, if you have that artificial light, maybe fluorescent lighting or blue lights in your house or a TV shining in your face or a smartphone shining in your face, after dark stimulates your adrenals to not only make cortisol, giving you that I'm too wired to sleep feeling, but also blocks melatonin production. So even if you fall asleep, you will find you have trouble staying asleep. In addition to that, studies have shown that blue light after dark stimulates insulin production, leading to weight gain through late night munchies or just simply by muscle breakdown from stress. And that muscle turns into sugar. That elevates your blood sugar. That causes weight gain. So simply putting on blue light blocking glasses from swanwicksleep.com can be a recipe for sleeping better and even losing weight. And right now, you can save 10% off your favorite stylish pair of Swannies by using my code FIT410. That's FITFOR 10. Visit swanwicksleep.com and use my code today. My favorite pair? I'm currently loving the aviators, so get you some today.